because of that, you notice a lot of them, their speaking and listening does not improve much whatsoever. But once you take that away, they notice these things that they hadn't noticed before just through could be getting instead. Right? Self is not he's not as competent as someone that has seen colors. They're missing like an entire dimension, even though they've studied it their entire lives.
Yeah, there's certainly some things in life we just have to experience.
I think the way you speak, like if I always consider like my words be read without emotion most of the time. So like I choose my words very carefully and make my text as neutral as possible because of this exact issue. Because words could just be misconstrued. And with it also the emotions behind them, you know. There's like if you read my post, there's a very specific tone behind a lot of what I post. Like say for instance, when it comes to news, you almost feel like as if there's nothing to it. It's almost like as if there's just an announcement of a particular thing that's happening, and that's just that, because that's what it's intended for. Whereas if I did something that's more philosophical in nature, you can tell what emotion I'm actually trying to convey here. Is it something that's more nihilistic? Is it something that's not so nihilistic? Is it something that's meant to be confusing, meant to get you to think? You know, so yeah. I kind of feel like the filter where emotions and everything else is kind of like disconnected from text itself is kind of the kind of like a litmus test almost, but it's not just for the person reading it, but also the person that is you publishing it.
The more you go down, the less of a tell you have for everything, right? So when you go down from video, when you go down from in-person to video, you lose a lot of body language that you would have noticed otherwise. Right?
Yes.
When you go from video to the sound, you lose facial expressions. You lose a lot of the details through that, right? And then when you leave out the voice, you lose a lot of detail, and then text is a lot less. It has less detail than pretty much every other form of communication.
Yes, which is also why which is also very interesting, because I think a lot of the reasons why people are not able to express themselves properly in any other context is because they've never considered what it would sound like if it was written down. Like whenever I say any particular thing, say even in spaces, I imagine that a lot of this stuff will be written down somewhere. And then I think to myself, would this look okay? Would this be effectively conveying what it is that I wanted to convey? Is it something that looks like as if it was emotional, as if it was something that's not emotional, that kind of thing. Like every single thing that I say right here, I actually expect to look a certain way, you know, because that's just basically self-awareness, right? The same thing also applies to communication, because the thing is this, you know, somebody once brought up something really interesting to me about, you know, the impression that you leave behind, where they would just say, oh, I wear perfume. I'm like, why do you wear perfume? I don't have the need to wear perfume. Well, you have to in order to be remembered in a particular setting. And you have to because that's the best way to be remembered. Without that, you just won't be. I'm like, I don't remember Alex Jones because I know what he smells like. I mean, I'm just gonna say, you know, I don't know what he smells like. I don't know. Does he smell good? Does he smell bad? Is that an objective thing? Is that an objective thing?
What do you imagine he smells like?
I was gonna say,
Does he like pine? Does he like pineapple? Does he do this? Does he do this really next level fucking annoying thing where you put like vanilla smell on you? Why is vanilla the fragrance? Ugh.
I will say.
I bet he smells like bacon.
I will say there's things that are supplementary and there's things that are like the essentials, right? So the smell is very, very important as a supplementary thing, right? Unless you smell bad, right? Because not smelling bad is essential, right? Whereas wearing perfume is supplementary, right? So the essentials are the first things you need to take care of, right? And then once you have the essentials handled, you can think about the supplementaries to add more of an impact, right? But if the essentials aren't handled, no one's going to remember you because of the perfume. They'll just remember you as a dickhead with good perfume.
Exactly.
So supposedly, I think it's Disney has done a lot of studies about how different scents will affect you psychologically. And at places like Disneyland and Disney World, they will actually specifically have different areas smell differently because studies psychologically have shown that it puts you in a different state of mind. So that's something that they've actually scientifically studied and will try to recreate.
That's true. That is true. but no one would go there if Disney World was shit. Right? Right? So that is supplementary. It adds more of an impact.
Yes. No, that makes perfect sense, of
It's
course.
not the essential. It gets those people to spend more money, but it's not the thing that gets those people to go there.
That's a good point.
I could even argue with in social settings, it's actually nicer when you don't smell like anything, because then it tells me two things, depending upon, of course, what happens next. It tells me you are either very confident in your words and how you present yourself physically. So I think if you're very confident in what you are able to do, how you're able to present yourself, then you actually don't need to smell like anything to leave behind a good, lasting impression. Because you can always leave behind a lasting impression, but what is the nature of that impression, right?
I think that's like an individual preference, though. I know people that whenever I go around, I always wear perfume. I know people that I know that I don't. They pretty much don't care, so I don't wear any perfume around them, right? It's more of an individual choice at that point.
I kind of use it as a measure by which I gauge a person's level of awareness. Because if you smell like intensely of a certain perfume, and so you visit a certain place, like somebody's home, and then you leave behind that smell, I personally think that that's like the more intense the smell, the less that person has a sense of self-awareness, and it's been actually consistent. It's like, for instance, the best discussions I've had with people is, for sure, they would wear a little bit of fragrance, but after they're gone, there's nothing left behind. Nothing. Everything's nice. Everything's just as it was before.
You don't.
I actually found that they have more self-awareness because they consider that.
Yeah, you don't want to put too much.
Yeah, I think there's definitely something. Can I give you I'm going to play devil's advocate again on this. I did this thing when I was studying in college for quite some time. So I had to it doesn't work perfectly, but in any case, let's say you pick a subject like physics and you chew a particular flavor of gum. Then whenever you're studying biology,
I know what you're doing. The one where you attach a subject to each gum, right?
Exactly. Yeah. You attach a subject to each gum. I don't know if I already told you this or you've heard.
No, I've heard it before.
Okay, it works very effectively, by the way. So you do this, you study, and then later in life, you naturally can chew or smell that scent, and your brain kind of is primed towards it. It's kind of like context seeding in an LLM. Now, if you think about it, theoretically, while you might be wearing the scent for other people, but you smell that scent more than other people. So when you wear a little bit of perfume when you're going out and you're socializing, it puts your brain into a slightly different state. But like Adrian said, you don't need to have it so overbearing that it's left there for others. I think if you're going to wear it,
that state doesn't just work.
And the person in your bubble. That's it.
Because that state doesn't just work that state doesn't just work for you. Like state-dependent memory is actually really nice. I had a long discussion about this. Usually within the context of study.
You're triggering memories in other people.
Yes. So let's say, for instance, I have various many memories of people that have all turned out to be assholes, where I now smell that very particular scent again because it's so fucking common that I just go, ugh.
Your Sauvage.
I think it's vanilla.
Oh, all right. Yeah.
No, not vanilla. That's not even. Actually, that's a very specific type of person I just don't want anything to do with. It's like, what? Usually tourists with a lot of sun cream on. That's usually the type of image that I get because that's been consistently my experience. For some reason, the one who's noisiest on the plane for no fucking reason at all. Oh yeah. No. Not saying nothing against the taste or the smell of it in the context of food, but in the context of a person, fuck no.
Right.
Do you want to smell like bacon, bro? Do you want to smell like that? Like you come home, you smell like bacon, or you go to a social context. Hey, actually, to me, smelling like vanilla in a corporate context is like as if I were to smell like bacon, like really obviously smell like bacon, and go to a convention where there's a ton of vegans around. It's about as insensitive, in my opinion.
I mean, to be fair, I would do that.
I mean, I wouldn't put it past you. I think that's fucking hilarious, but I'm just saying, I'm just giving an example here that many people would understand, because if they subjectively put a different take on this, then this is the best way I can explain it as a concept.
Do you smell like butter
like,
and steak, Adrian?
It doesn't actually smell like anything at all, unless of course you burn it. I actually don't smell like anything after I eat.
Oh yeah, because you don't cook it. You only go rare, right?
Yeah, exactly. I'm not gonna burn the fucking steak and you're on like
you
6
only
cleanup.
well, no, you don't burn. You don't have to burn the steak to get that smell. It's only like after medium rare that you get that smell. The smell of steak.
Yeah.
Before that, it doesn't really have a particular smell.
Wait, is there like a chemical thing that happens at a certain point where that's interesting?
I don't know. I assume so, but I've noticed because I eat like occasionally I eat rare, but usually I eat medium rare. But if I'm like ordering from outside, I'll get like a medium because by the time it gets there, it's gonna be cold. So or colder,
Okay.
right? So I've noticed that when you get rare, it doesn't really have a smell, or not a strong smell at least, right? And when it's like medium, it has a much stronger smell. I haven't eaten anything past medium, so I don't know what that smells like, but I assume the smell gets stronger as you cook it more.
I didn't understand why people do medium. I just go straight rare. And wherever I go, I always order that because I'd assume that if they don't know how to cook it properly, the worst case that can happen is that it's raw, but the best case is that could happen is that it's like medium, or it turns into medium.
I think people freak out if they see like the quote unquote like it's really not blood, but like the red juices coming from it. There's just like a psychological reaction.
Too much squeamishness,
Wait,
I feel like you're being
who the fuck
imprisoned
is
in like a
having
concrete jungle,
Hold on, who is having psychological like trauma from
Have
the
you ever
red juices?
have you ever like met a person who's afraid of their own blood?
No.
Yes.
I've heard about them online.
It's a genetic thing, actually.
It is the most weirdest thing ever. Like if I bleed, I'm like, oh shit, where's this coming from? And then I assess, okay, probably want to patch it up. But then if somebody else bleeds, I have the same instinct. Meanwhile, that type of person would see this be like, a tiny little cut somewhere. It's just really not much of anything. You don't even need to patch it up most of the time. You're like, oh my god, you're gonna die! Like that's the instinct that they get.
I haven't met any of those people, but like I've seen like some examples online.
Be happy.
I've never met.
Be happy.
I've never met anyone like that in real life.
Be happy, bro. Be happy.
There's enough of those people. Maybe as an evolutionary trait, you need a certain percentage of those people, so that as a society, everybody just kind of avoids the sight of blood, because that's probably good for evolution.
Yeah, actually.
Yeah, like as a natural disease vector.
Like think about
the same way that we're like
about AIDS, right? AIDS, even if you don't have like a sexual intercourse, AIDS can spread just through blood, right? So in that case, there might be a natural need for those people because, you don't want to get too much blood because some diseases are contracted through blood.
That's probably why certain like really really rancid smells have like an instinctual disgust reaction too, right? Is that we've just evolved or had the experience of, okay, like that is going to get me sick. I have to get away from that because it like biologically is going to infect me.
I think smell is still the least understood sense of all our senses.
Yeah. It's a very important one, though. It's a very important one because imagine you meet someone and they smell bad, right? You immediately dislike the person.
It's also pretty interesting. Like bad smells, I think, are more or less universal. Like, taste. I think people have differences in what they like.
That's true. That's true.
Right?
Well,
somebody might find something not tasty.
Hold on, no. There's people out there that really like the smell of like cigars and oil and smell of farts or some shit like that. Right? I don't think it's completely as universal as you're saying.
I think stuff like
you can override it with memory.
Yeah, but it's memory, like exactly. Because like if you think of oil, like I think of my dad used to like come in after working on cars and stuff, but you're associating it with like positive memories. It's not the smell of oil necessarily, it's that association.
Okay, so what about the people that like smelling farts?
Their dad farted
Explain.
a lot.
I can't explain that one.
Every time their dad gave him a really loving hug, he
A really loving flirt.
Oh my god.
I mean, for me, sawdust is that way. I like genuinely, when I smell sawdust, I immediately feel very close to my father, no matter where he is.
You know, I was reading a book. I'm reading a book, 48 Laws of Power right now. Well, I read it before, but I read it before. I'm rereading it, and like one of the.
I love that book. It's awesome.
Yeah, one of the stories is like in like some Ethiopian proverb, right? It's like about like pleasing people above you while also like insulting them in a way to like take away from their power, and it's like the peasant bows before the king as deep as he can, and then lets out a fart. And it's like an Ethiopian proverb.
That's great. That's actually great. That's basically a physical manifestation of malicious compliance.
Peaceful disobedience.
Well, slightly not so peaceful, but disobedience nonetheless. There would be natural consequence of, you know. Malicious compliance deserves to be studied.
It's like kind of like when Tesla was forced to put a sound in the car, and they decided to allow you to put whatever you want in there. My personal favorite is to play the song Bella Ciao, because it's all about protesting. You can have a nice song in there.
I was thinking about this.
Or
like
you
what
can
Apple
whack at
right
another
now is
person.
doing, or like what Apple is doing in the EU right now, malicious compliance.
Will the Tesla Optimus have a fart mode? Like, can they just port that over from the cars?
It's a good question, but what I would really want to know is where do you think the charge port goes?
Oh my god.
I think fart mode's a necessity. We need it.
Will the Tesla fuck what? God damn it. Will Optimus have microplastic in his balls?
Yes, I think the answer to your question now is yes, they will fuck.
No, I was
It's a bit more macro than micro, but sure, there will definitely be plastic located in that specific area.
Oh my god. No, I was gonna say, will it have microplastics in its balls? That was my joke.
Yeah, I'm sure it'll have some microplastics.
Yes, but they're more macro than micro.
Macroplastics.
I mean, look, isn't it very macro if your balls are made out of plastic? Just saying. It's not so micro anymore, that issue.
Yeah.
Every time the bot is doing a task that it can do while seated, theoretically, it could be charging. But knowing this information, where do you put the charge port as an engineer?
Oh my god. Oh my
Like, there's only
god.
2 places. I think there's only like 2 acceptable places to put it. It's like in the back of the neck, right there. That's pretty good. Or where its legs are, perhaps. Because either or position around the pelvic area is not really. You can't put it up its ass. You can't put it in the front. Where do you put it? Where the belly button normally is located? Like, where do you put the charge port? In the back of the,
So
in the, back of the neck. I think it's better.
I will say the ass is probably the best choice from an engineering perspective, but from a social perspective, I don't think they're gonna do that. Right?
Why not?
I think Elon will force them to.
Who's not buying a robot because there's a charge?
Just like how with the Starship, they said it's not pointy enough. Make it more pointy. And he paid like $100 million in engineering just
for the
to
sake
like
of the argument. Just for the sake of the argument. Just for the sake of the argument. The words. Dude, just for the sake of the argument, the words "open butthole" opens the charge port flap on a Tesla car. Just saying. Okay, just saying. So I think because, like you stated, from an engineering perspective, it's the best place to put the charge port. I think that's exactly where it's going to go, right up the ass.
The most entertaining outcome is the most probable.
Yep. But here's the kicker, though. It's a robot. It doesn't have an ass.
Or does it? Dong, dong, dong.
That would be an even better engineering challenge. Just give it like butt cheeks that actually work and look cool.
Did you guys
Then
see
put the charging port between
Well,
them.
this is a very slippery slope. Let's see what this is going next.
Did you guys see the Neo today?
Yes.
Yeah.
Actually looks
And
pretty.
their intro video was definitely from a casting porn. Yes.
But that wasn't the point I was going to make. But what I was going to say is that a lot of people did not believe that was real. They thought it was like a real human.
Well, I think they kind of contributed to that by putting it in that weird like sweatshirt suit. They're obviously trying to cover up some of its mechanics, possibly for like trade secrets.
Right.
But that people's immediate thought is, oh, that's like a dude wearing a sweatshirt.
Right.
The arms were exposed, and you could see the connections on the hands themselves. Also, I don't know if you guys follow Dar, but he used to work at Tesla, and he now works at what's it called? One
X. Yeah.
1X. It's something like that. Sorry. But yeah, I don't think that person goes to work at that company if there's no AI involved. So I think just like Tesla Bulls sometimes discounted Waymo, I would not assume Optimus is just going to win just because, Tesla's doing it. There has to be concerted effort put into it.
Well, there could be more than one.
Competition, yeah.
Yeah, and they will contribute to each other, and sort of like, in this case, I think competition is good. But Tesla has the supercomputers, which are going to be very difficult to impossible to compete with, I think. Because so much of it is the training, right?
Yeah, because right now the only serious electric car competition is just the Chinese companies, the American companies, and the European companies are not really serious competition. So, and the Chinese competition doesn't have access to the bleeding edge GPUs needed to train this.
Yeah, exactly. And it's like, okay, so other companies will be able to make humanoid robots, but will they be able to make 1 million of them? And will they have the software, which is actually the neural networks, to make them usable in the real world? And that's where I think people are totally underestimating the advantage of putting the full self-driving software into Optimus, because so many of those problems have already been solved.
So I don't think I'm going to play devil's advocate, but I do believe in what I'm saying here at this point. It's not devil's advocate purely. NVIDIA is actually making a simulated world. Think about robotics as it's not as challenging from a battery dynamic, right? So like the amount of batteries that need to go into a robot is going to be quite low compared to a car. And a lot of these OEMs may have failed at it, but those aren't the competition when you're talking about robotics, right? You're actually going to be going up against Silicon Valley types. So I think it's actually going to be a harder battle because of that reason. And then the final thing is, the way AI is built, it's the process that matters, right? Like people keep thinking that because FSD is there, it's going to be really good. No, it's the process. So the speed at which it's taking Tesla to get FSD out the door makes me feel more nervous for Tesla than confident in Tesla, because they need to be pushing releases like every week, every 2 weeks, every month. And the argument that they're going to have a large training cluster is fine, but if that's mostly NVIDIA chips, that's not an advantage.
I totally agree that NVIDIA itself will be a major player. And a lot of people sort of forget that they have, they supercomputing clusters themselves. You look at the companies that have the most GPUs right now. So you've got your Meta, your Google, your Tesla, your NVIDIA, your Apple.
Meta is ahead by a wide margin, very, very wide margin compared to everyone else right now in terms of GPUs.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's up there for sure.
It's like if I remember last time I had checked, it was like 4 times more than Google, right? Because they have gotten all these GPUs because they wanted to train for their for their algorithm for Instagram Reels, and also for the Facebook algorithm. And they had decided that if there's like a new technology that requires GPUs, they want to be ahead of everyone else. right? That's why they had so much compute to throw at a random LLM that they could open weight, right?
What about Memphis at Tesla and XAI?
I think once XAI is finished, they will be like a serious competition. But as of now, I think they're still waiting.
Well, because what really matters here is you look at the transactions of GPUs, right? Meta ordered 100,000 H100s last year, and Memphis, I think, did somewhere close to that, if not the same. So
yeah, but they already have quite a lot of H100s already.
You're talking about like how many have arrived, or
how many they already have running?
Oh, like from the start, yeah.
Do you think GPUs are the winner, or do you think ASICs are the winner?
I think so it really depends on this whole AI, how this whole AI thing plays out, right? So if we find that for some reason the companies all decide because the public market, let's say the stockholders of these companies demand that they stop investing so much into AI, right? Because they are making a very significant and large contribution to AI, and no company has really made any financial return from this, right? So if the shareholders of the companies demand that these companies stop spending so many resources on AI, then in that environment, GPUs are going to be worth much more, because GPUs can be used for tasks other than just training AI, right? Now, for Meta, for example, I think actually Meta in this way is actually the best positioned. Meta can train their other AI models that actually pertain to their core products, right? Even for the H100 specifically meant for AI, right? Whereas other companies who have just bought it just to train LLMs right now, or maybe in the future some other type of AI that they're going to train, they would be in a worse place because their core product doesn't use AI. Their core products don't use AI, right? Whatever they're making money off of. So in that environment, I think GPUs would be much, much, much better for that specific type of AI. But if we see that this investment continues to increase, and there is no AI winter, I think in that case you will see that a lot of companies will start moving to ASICs, right?
I have a gut feeling too that there may be a development in the next several years that we currently don't really have on the horizon, that nobody has really anticipated yet. This is just based on a gut feeling more than direct evidence. But like a GPU was developed in the early 90s. So if you think about it, that architecture, even though it's very useful for AI, wasn't really designed for AI, right? It was designed for graphics, thus the G of GPU. And I wonder if something a little bit more like a TPU or something that's like a hybrid architecture might emerge in the next several years. And that's just not something that really anybody... Go ahead.
I will say TPUs, the structures of TPUs, it's like it's very similar to a GPU, right?
Yeah.
So it's not something that is completely different to a GPU. It's just slightly different.
No, it's very different. It's very, very different. They're two completely different things.
But as I understand it, that they're designed in a very similar ways, right? It's just that it's more efficient for AI specifically, right? And it's less power. It consumes less power.
No, there's a huge difference. So the input to GPUs is a vector and a matrix. That's it. One of your inputs must be a vector. The input to a matrix multiplier unit, which, by the way, I think Apple is so good at naming. They came up with the best names. So TPUs, MMUs, Dojo, all these different things Grok with a Q. Grok with a K. Dang it, I'm forgetting which one it is. The chip one. All these different companies, they're building. Q. Thank you. Grok with a Q. They're all making chips that are matrix multipliers. And I think Apple's name should be the one we use because, I think very few people who haven't taken advanced math know the difference between a matrix and a tensor. Right? Like if I was to ask that question. And on the chipsets themselves, I'm not even sure if they're tensors. I think they're actually just matrices because I don't think they carry the sign bit.
Well, it doesn't matter if it's a matrix or a tensor or a vector. It's as long as the stride is correct and it's like the sequence of floating point numbers in memory, it doesn't matter. You just have to make sure that memory accesses are coalesced and that it doesn't matter as long as you can access it properly and it has proper strides.
Yeah, for training as well, I think the thing you're saying makes a bigger difference in training. I don't think it makes as big of a difference in inference once people are learning it.
It does.
Yeah, it does because because it's more efficient, but they're doing it in very similar ways. They're running the LLM in a very similar way.
How much more efficient do you think it is?
It's much more efficient. My argument is that they have very similar structures for processing the LLMs.
Yeah, I'm saying that they don't because it's like what you're taking is with a GPU, you're taking a vector and you're manipulating it in usually 4 different ways because you have your matrix can basically you fill in the numbers and you can basically translate, you can shift, you can resize. Those are what the original things and the intentions of the GPU was. That's what the matrices were there for. Even the B series chips you look at coming out of NVIDIA now, they're less and less GPUs. They're more and more closer to a TPU and an MMU, but they still have a lot of generic stuff in there. The key distinction is in a GPU, you have to take each column and process it in parallel and then stitch it back together. So at a minimum, even if you had enough parallel compute to process it all at once, given the size of your matrix, you would still have to take 2 or 3 steps, depending on, splitting it, processing it, merging it. In a MMU, it's all one step. But it's even bigger than that because you actually do all of the matrix multiplication in one go, and it's at a core level, so it's not like there's not as many like instructions to say, okay, now we're going to do this thing and we're going to fetch it from here.
That's more of a actual the type of calculations it can do. I'm saying the structure of how they handle it is very similar, right? They have parallel cores, which are running in unison for running the LLM, right? It's just that those are specifically designed for matrices.
Well, yes, the way you write code for TPUs is similar to that of optimized CUDA code. On the software abstraction is very similar, but the actual what it's getting at is the hardware architecture is different. You use tensor core instructions, which are literally going to instead of loading in this column with like a float 4, you have floating point numbers instead of scalar loading. Like you don't even have to worry about that kind of stuff. It's all dealt with by the hardware. Like you literally just say, I want to multiply this by this, and that is a single instruction. That's a tensor core instruction. So you don't have to worry about optimizing. You can optimize other shit, right?
Yeah. So what happens? Here's a trade-off with these ASICs. The depth, the number of layers, must be capped at design time, at the chip design time. Whereas for a GPU, you don't have that requirement because if you have too many layers, all that happens is you do it in multiple passes. Now, there's math tricks so that you can actually do the same thing with matrices, but it's not, arguably, you start to lose some of the advantage. However, the core difference is instead of doing let's say a GPU has 10 parallel cores, or it can effectively have 10 parallel cores, a matrix multiplier might be able to have 1,000. It's a significant difference.
Wouldn't it be, let's say in the future we figure out how to do LLMs in a way that is better than just matrices, right? Wouldn't that then be a limiting factor? What?
I said that is in fact the idea, to reduce it from quadratic to subquadratic, meaning like n log n, similar to FFTs, or even linear time like Mamba, right? So getting that subquadratic time complexity is critical for scaling systems.
Right, but
but it's only quadratic on a GPU. it's subquadratic as soon as you go to a matrix multiplier, because your first order operation is a matrix multiplication.
So if we move on from something like matrices, wouldn't we have to create entirely new TPUs to handle that?
Correct.
Whereas with the
Well, I
GPU,
mean, if you're doing like a tensor core instruction to multiply two, like say 4x4 matrices, if you have a bigger one, if you jump from 1024 by 1024 to 4096 by 4096, you're doing tiling, right? And that tiling is still quadratic. You still have to tile that times itself number. You still have to do essentially squared number of computations, even when you're doing tiling with tensor core level operations. Like the tensor core level operations make each tile faster, but it doesn't make the whole problem scale differently.
It can, right? Because if you had to do the same size matrix on a GPU, you would not. It would take much longer still. So I agree. You do end up having to do tiling.
Yes, it's the difference between like theoretical and practical scaling, right? Like with practical, tensor cores and TPUs are going to scale better, but theoretically speaking, like that's where most of the problem comes in. It's not just the hardware. I think Auda was talking about more so like the software level. How do we define better architectures that like aren't as compute and memory intensive as matrix multiplication, right?
So I think this is kind of what we were talking about with Gary too for a little bit. The idea is, if the final lattice structure is transformers, investing in ASICs today is the best monetary investment you can make. And the company that's made the biggest bet on that is clearly Google, right? If transformers are not the final lattice structure, all that money is wasted, because those ASICs cannot be repurposed, whereas GPUs could.
that was my point. That was my argument.
Agreed. I understand your argument. I was just trying to poke at it a different way.
Dude, there'd be an insane well shift if like we go to like a different like sublinear non-matrix matrix tensor core level instruction. Like if we go off of that hardware, so much wealth is going to be transferred. It'll be insane. Like if you guys can get in on some of the research that's happening there, like when it starts to emerge, like understanding that in depth will actually make you a lot of money if you do it properly.
Yeah, but the ASICs themselves will be made useless because the ASICs have been specifically made.
Yeah, but I'm saying
the architecture is different. What do you believe is the chances of that happening? Let's say like a decade time scale, Elliot, which is like a decent amount of time for things to change. Many things in technology will completely change in 10 years, but it's not so far in the future that it's difficult to envision. Like what percentage chance would you assign to that entire architecture moving in that direction in 10 years?
So let's start with number one. I'm not an AI researcher and I'm not qualified to speak on this topic, but if we ignore that part, I don't know, maybe like, I guess my intuition here is like when we make more intelligent systems that help us develop algorithms faster and learn faster and everyone just like goes on this like exponential curve, then I can see the chances increasing, like especially over the next 10 years with better features and tools. Like I can see the chances of that accelerating, but like altogether, it's really hard because I don't actually know how neural net architectures are tested mathematically in the lab. Like I haven't been inside of Anthropic or OpenAI. I don't know how they approach chinchilla scaling laws. Like there's actually a paper on this. You can look at chinchilla scaling laws. It literally says if you change the amount of text data that you train a model on and you change the model size, you can predict what the loss will be. You can predict what the end loss will be to great precision. That's what chinchilla scaling laws say. But the whole idea with like changing architectures or making things scale better is like, what can we modify about the transformer such that chinchilla scaling laws change a bit and maybe we can still predict them well? Like that's the really, really big question.
We're making the assumption that transformer is the best way to go forward.
Yes.
It may not be.
Yes, right. Well, that is the question.
May I try and make an argument?
Yeah, sure.
I'm going to try and make the argument that transformers is like provably the only way to go. This is kind of like what I would have loved to try and do with Gary, but he didn't want to hear it. Neural nets have been matrix multiplication by hand, linear optimization since the 60s. What people think is there's going to be a new architecture. there are different architectures, there's different lattice structures, there's different approaches, etc. But every single approach that has ever existed, what it was doing was it was trying to say, I'm going to force artificially somehow a compression in the number of cells that are involved in the calculation between the matrices by telling the model where to pay attention. That was never like materialized or said that way until the transformer paper came out. What they basically said when they said attention is all you need, it wasn't just a meme. It was actually supposed to be like a big lesson, right? And there's this concept called the bitter lesson that is coming from this. Every time we tell the model what to do, we're wrong. It just is reality. We don't know how it works. We should stop telling it how it works. It's much, much better to just say, we're going to have a generic matrix and we're going to really optimize the shit out of it. So the cliff that I would argue is you can't just invent something that's better than transformers, because it would be, maybe you could invent something that's better than transformers on GPU, but you got to compete with transformers on a matrix multiplier, not transformers on a GPU.
Well, I think what he's getting at is a new architecture that wouldn't require matrix multiplication in the normal attention style, right? I mean, attention is like you just have this associative memory going on where it's attending to each token, right? You have these queries and keys.
Key query.
That yes, they're dot product with each other, and you get these attention scores, which says how much each token is like interacting with each other one, right? And so once you can find a way to get that scalable attention working without quadratic time complexity, that may or may not be a breakthrough. I don't know how to develop that, but yes, attention is all you need.
No, but even without, like, even if you remove the multi-head attention, which is what you're describing, from the equation, if you look at any vanilla any vanilla neural net from the 60s, they could run on a matrix multiplier. So it's not that the specifics of transformers are not what's being baked into the ASICs. What's being baked into the ASICs is matrix multiplication and some activation functions. But that, that's...
Well, sure, then maybe Benjamin should be more clear. Like, are we looking for something that requires matrix multiplication, or like a new architecture that's just going to be better than transformers, but may still include it? Like, what?
Well, my question is, what is there if you're not doing matrix multiplication? What other method is there?
You have convolutions, you have recurrent neural networks, which aren't really parallelizable, and you can't scale them super well.
But those are also matrix
that's my point. I don't understand. Aren't you doing matrix multiplication when you get down to the actual math level of it? Isn't it all matrix multiplication?
Well, what it really matters about is how big are the matrices, right? Like, if you multiply a 1024 by 1024, that's going to take a very long time compared to just a 4x4 multiply. So if you have a bunch of 4x4 multiplies, and it's not like scaling quadratically, that's not really an issue, right? I mean, you could still do those, but it's more so the scale of the matrices you're talking about. So when you have like the final classifier layer in the GPT, where you have all these like little attention heads that are doing stuff in parallel, like that's really intensive, right? Like that's a lot of compute you have to do, and it's matrix multiplication centered. So if you have smaller ones to do, and you have this like recurrent state going on with loops, that might actually be a better architecture. We don't know yet.
Okay, I see what you're saying. I see.
I'll make the counter argument there. I think we know that deep learning works better than shallow learning, at least for training the teachers. So if that is the case, then anytime you're going to do deep learning means you're going to have a large matrix. It doesn't have to be tall, but it's definitely going to be wide.
Okay, so currently, with the current state of hardware, what is the current best leading edge hardware to do that type of matrix multiplication? And what are the chances that changes in the foreseeable future?
It's an ASIC. So I can describe it with an analogy, if that's okay.
Yeah.
So hardware 3 and hardware 4, I think a lot of people got confused when they're like, oh, Tesla had abandoned everything they were doing, right? And I think there's an analogy that helps with understanding. Imagine hardware 3 was a regular keyboard, and people were writing stories, and they just observed, or let's say tweets, right? They observed all the tweets that people are writing out there. Then someone comes up with an optimization, and we're just going to do one simple optimization. they say, we're going to swap out the letter Q on the keyboard with a key that when you press it, it types QU. You still have your backspace key. You can still type out the letter Q, but now you have to type out QU backspace. Ultimately, over the population, this new keyboard is going to have less keystrokes because 99% of the time, Q is followed by the letter U. Except maybe not on Twitter because of Tesla Q and all those other things, but you get my point. Like in general, storybook writing. It doesn't mean that one hardware cannot express what the other hardware can. It does mean that one is going to be more efficient than the other one. So what Ashok and others were talking about was they had to write an adapter because there was many more than one. I'm sure differences in the base level instruction sets. Those had to be adapted into the compiler so that they only had to write the code once, and it would just at the compiler level figure out how to compile for hardware 3 or hardware 4.
Okay, so for that type of math that we're talking about, an ASIC is currently the best known architecture to efficiently perform that multiplication, correct?
ASIC, so an ASIC isn't like a specific architecture. It just means application specific device. It's like an application specific device. So you choose what you want the computer to focus on, and it's built only to do that task. So, like for example, the devices that mine Bitcoin, for example, those are ASICs, right? They're specifically made to basically do the math that is required to create a new block in the Bitcoin blockchain, right? That could not be used to mine another currency like Ethereum Classic because they use a different algorithm, right? It's not that they can do algorithms, it's just that they're built to do a specific thing, right? So in this case, he's talking about something that would be specifically made to do matrices and only matrices.
It's like literally optimizing for throughput on a specific volume of chip, right? So you have like a set chip that you're working with, a certain amount of space that you're allowed to, while maintaining thermal stability. It's like you have to maximize throughput for a specific operation or set of algorithms on that.
So right now, if you get like a GPU, that's a general device that does it generally, right? Whereas with an ASIC, it's built for a specific task, and because of that, for the cost, it does much better performance and uses less energy than something that is a general built like a GPU.
And this stuff, think of it, this is not going to be a perfect analogy, but this is not going to be a perfect analogy. And I want to be very clear. This is not how it works. But you could think of it like a GPU went to school to become like a general practitioner doctor. They can do a lot of things, but if they had to figure out how to do surgery on you, you probably don't want that doctor doing the surgery unless they go back to school and spend a lot of time doing it, and they maybe be a little bit slow doing it. And then you have an ASIC where it's like, this chip is only a surgeon. It's not going to be good at, telling you why the kid is sick or like optometry or whatever. One can be specialized to do many things, but it's slow relatively. And the other one is not. But it is exactly what we're seeing. Like, CPUs are really, really, really generic.
Yeah.
And GPUs are a little less generic because they only operate on vectors. And then matrix multipliers, I would argue, aren't truly ASICs, right? They are somewhat generic in that they operate on matrices. And who knows, one day we might realize, hey, you know what? One-dimensional, we had zero-dimensional, we have one-dimensional, we're now looking at two-dimensional. I wonder what the next thing to do is.
Three-dimensional. But
Actually 3, 4, 5-dimensional if you're doing convolutions. But it's typically 3, 4, 5.
Yeah, I don't know if matrix multiplier will count as an ASIC because
I also don't know how you do more than three-dimensional in our physical world.
Oh, come on. It's just math, dude.
No, you have to connect the wires. You have to actually connect the wires to each other in an ASIC physically.
Yeah. But I don't know. You could do I don't know. If you're doing like a 4-dimensional,
so
like n by.
Hold on. So hold on. If you're doing a 4-dimensional, right? Because we can do it, as math in like a more general computer, would that mean that we can build like a? We can never build like an ASIC that can do 4-dimensional well.
Yeah, there's something called like the star problem, right? Like, picture, something where you have like a node, and then you have a whole bunch of nodes on the outside in a wheel, and you have a rope connecting all of them to each other. You can do that, right? Now, if you were to say, I'm now going to pick another node, I'm going to connect all the other nodes to it, but I never want any of the wires to cross over each other, it's not possible in a two-dimensional space. This is the problem. You can't physically connect wires in a four-dimensional way in a three-dimensional space because at some point your wires are going to touch and they're going to short. Same thing with doing three-dimensional and two-dimensional space.
Clearly, we need to figure out how to get to the fourth dimension.
I'm testing this out of PyTorch right now.
Like if somebody could figure out how to make, and this is probably going to come out of TSMC, if somebody could figure out how to make a three-dimensional circuit, if they come out and they're like, oh, we don't just have circuit boards, we have circuit cubes. Okay, the world just unlocked.
Did you see the thing I sent you with TSMC's like schedule?
Yeah. They have some magic, man.
Yeah.
I don't know what the hell they're praying to some crazy, ritual sacrifices. I don't know what they're doing, but they're ahead of everybody.
Yeah. And
They can really say that our closest competition is really hard to see. They can genuinely say that. They're a worldwide treasure, and I never really understood the global politics of Taiwan. And then when I saw this, I'm like, this makes all the sense in the world. This is why there will be a third world war if there is.
Intel's like will catch up to TSMC within 2 to 3 years. Meanwhile, their ships are now fucking collapsing. Right.
They're saying we'll catch up to where they were a decade ago in 2 to 3 years. They're like so far behind.
You know what the funniest thing was? I was checking like the latest like Intel chips right on Wikipedia, and I was looking like at the process, and it was like Intel made with Intel 4. And then right next to it, brackets, 7 nanometers. And then TSMC was like TSMC N4. And it was like 4 nanometers. What the fuck is this?
One's using an increasing numeric scheme, right?
No, what I mean was that like, so Intel, their number is supposed to like be corresponding to like the nanometer that they're building on.
Right. Are you sure? You don't think it's just like Intel 1, 2, 3, 4,
No,
5?
because the 7 nanometer is called Intel 7, right? And this one's like 66, right? 66. What's the number? Like A something, right? I forgot the name of it. Once you go below nanometer, but it's like 66.
Pico?
So it's like slightly below 7, and it's like they call it 4. Well, I'll send you the image.
Yeah, I think you're referring to picometers, by the way.
You're such a nerd, Meta. Picometers, dude.
Guilty.
What's that, like?
So when you get to below
-9 or what?
When you get to below nanometer.
No, picometers are important to understand because, like, when you measure... Like,
1 E -12, okay.
No, what I mean is, if you look at like the TSMC chart, they put like A14 after like 2 nanometers. They're doing like A14 and then A10. So whatever that A is, what A stands for.
This is confusing.
I don't know. But I do find it funny how, like, sometimes all these leaders are like, we're going to get more chips, or we're going to solve the chip shortage. Like, who is we? Like, are you going to go figure out how to make these things? Like, they're doing it as fast as they can.
Yeah, we're going to invest $40 billion in the entire U.S. chip industry, right?
Well, Sam Altman's like, we need $10 trillion to compete with TSMC. And they're like, we'll do it with $4 billion.
Yeah, I'm like, motherfucker, TSMC spending $40 billion on a single fucking fab, right? You're saying we're gonna give $40 billion to all U.S. companies to build fucking fabs.
Wait, did you say that it costs $40 billion to manufacture one fab?
Yes.
Just that one out.
Yeah, well, just one fab.
How big is this fab? Jesus Christ.
Pretty fucking massive. They're very, very massive.
It's like a factory.
It's bigger than a factory.
Oh, so not like so like the individual chip fabs are like 100 million each. They're building like a whole factory of fabs. I see.
No,
Yeah.
it's a single fab. Single, like, massive fab.
Why would they do that?
You need to order your minimum order size with TSMC is not small.
What do you mean, why do they do that? Why would they not do that?
Why would they make a massive fab when they could just have a bunch of other cheaper batch producible small ones that do the same thing?
I don't think we should get into the business of telling TSMC how to do what they're doing.
Well, I'm not trying to tell them. I'm just trying to understand.
Secondly, have you ever been to
Sorry,
Taiwan?
just make a joke.
Have you ever been to Taiwan?
No.
No, okay. You can pretty much go from one side of Taiwan to the other side of Taiwan in 3 hours. Right? So if they started doing those small little things instead of doing everything in one place, they would run out of space really quickly.
So that's still a good reason to spend $40 billion on a single chip fab. I'm failing to understand like what the engineering benefit is from this.
Well, they can benefit from economies of scale, right? Because the fab is so big, right? Any little changes they want to make, right? They can do it there, right? Whereas, you know, if you have like
this giant modular super nanoscale gigafab that they're making, like, what is the point?
Okay, so let's say you run into an issue in one fab, right? Now, is that issue dedicated to that one fab, or is it dedicated to all of the fabs, right? Where does that issue start, right? So now you got to figure out if it's just that in that one fab, or if it's in all of them, right? And then let's say you find out it's just in that one fab. Okay, why is it in just that one fab, right? Is this issue present in all the other fabs, right? When they build out these giant fabs, they can plan for like 5 years in the future and build it to perfection before it actually gets built, right? Whereas if you're doing all these small...
Elliot's not wrong. Like, whenever I look at TSMC's strategy, it looks to me like they're saying we're going to roll a dice, and if we get it perfect, we'll be ahead of everything.
It's like you literally said this. Like, if there's a problem with one fab, it's like, what if the problem happens to this big fab that costs $40 billion? Then you're losing so much.
Okay, but here, think about it like this, right? If they're building a single giant fab, they can build it perfectly from the beginning and make sure everything is right? Samsung attempted the strategy that you're talking about, and look how that's working out for them, right? So they decided we're gonna spend less upfront, right? And we're gonna have like the operational cost slightly higher, and then they found out that it's not working out for them, and they're doing TSMC's exact strategy now. So if you have
I'm just kind of getting at, like, why would you jump up from like $100 million to $40 billion just like that? Right?
It was never $100 million. It hasn't been $100 million for the last few years.
For one fab?
Yes.
How much is it for a fab?
Usually $30 billion for TSMC, each one.
No. I mean like a single fab machine, like a single machine that can fit in a room.
Single machine. You're talking about
Yes.
single machine. Oh no, the single machines are $100 million.
Yeah. Yeah, so I'm saying like you take those and then you make those slightly bigger. Like instead of having one as like a square, you have 8 of them that make a cube, and that's like a bigger one that does more things, right? Instead of dumping all your eggs in one basket, you just change kind of your shaping and the dimensionality of your factory by making things bigger, you know?
Okay, but then you don't have access to everything else. You need to actually make that chip. And think about it like this, okay? So think about it like this, right? Let's say you have 1,000 different small fabs, right, that are all making this chip, right? How difficult is it going to be to communicate between all of them, right? It's going to be a fucking mess.
Well, if a bunch of them are doing the same task, why would you need to communicate through them? They're all doing their own individual work.
Look, the truck needs to go from here to here. Truck needs to go from here. Truck needs to go from here.
And be dust free.
Yeah, and be dust free.
And the truck needs to be dust free.
Right? You need to make sure that thousands of different fucking trucks, right, are all either one truck is going and picking up every single chip from every single one of the fabs, which is going to be highly inefficient, while remaining dust free, or you're going to have thousands of trucks and they're all going to the same direction, right, causing a shit ton of traffic. Like when you think about they can't communicate with each other well, right? You got to have thousands of people working that are just like, okay, this fab is doing well, this fab is doing well, this fab isn't doing well. Why isn't it working on this fab, right? If it's like an issue that's happening in one place, you can just focus on that one place. But if like 10 of them stop working, you got to figure out what the issue with 10 of them is.
Still though, when you're scaling things up, it does not seem logical to just put all your eggs in one basket from the get-go. I don't
But
see that being.
This is why I say they do some weird ritual sacrifice, because they seem to make it work.
This is the nature of the business, right? When you're in this business, it's a winner-take-all business, right? So you have to do anything that gives you an edge, right? If you're even 1 to 2% or like worse than your competition, right? Even if you have like a significantly cheaper price, no one that needs the bleeding edge is going to use you. Right? It's not a startup, because the amount of money that it needs is significantly higher than any other business, right? They're spending like 50% of their income, anything that they're making, on capital expenditure.
And the people working there have a national sense of pride, right? Like it's not a secret.
Yeah,
what they're doing is important.
Yeah, and so, like I said, Samsung initially like tried to do something like this and it didn't work out for them. So clearly, there's some benefits to this that we don't understand because we're not.
Okay. Well, it would help if you include that at the start. I mean, having some evidence really changes the story, doesn't it?
Yeah. The problem is TSMC is so secretive. It's hard to say why it works, other than the fact that we know it works.
Yeah.
Well, I know TSMC is not dumb. They're like head of computer manufacturing in the whole world. Like they're just number one by far. So it's like they obviously know what they're doing, but I'm trying to understand like the full reasoning, which obviously they will not just give me.
Yeah,
right.
But I'm saying,
by the way, it's great. It's great to have this conversation.
What I don't understand
because it expands our understanding.
What I don't understand is what's confusing about it to you, because to me it makes perfect sense.
Yeah, well, after explaining some stuff, it makes a little bit more sense, but I still remain skeptical. Like it just seems like the type of thing you'd find in a YouTube thumbnail, like, oh, this is what the next big cluster or the next big thing is going to be. And it's just like this giant, super upscaled machine that it doesn't like look realistic in practicality. It just seems like one of those, you know? But apparently this is a reality, and my brain is just having trouble believing that.
We see the same thing is true with Tesla too, right? Combining everything into one factory actually ends up being better, because the time that parts need to move from one location to the other, granted it's a much bigger scale, the time they need to move, it's less likely you're going to damage it, miscalibrate. If somebody needs to make a change somewhere, they can go make the change everywhere consistently. Same thing is going to be true with this fabrication process, right? The last thing you want.
My family has experience in manufacturing. Splitting things up is definitely not more efficient. It's significantly worse. Even if there's a higher upfront cost, it ends up costing you more in the long run.
The theory used to be that if you split things up, you could outsource some stuff, and then you could allow others to innovate on subsections and make them bid against each other. That theory is nice until you realize all the other people that suck go out of business because only the winners get all the business. So what you end up doing is you just end up splitting things between different companies, and all the companies are still moving product around. So it actually ends up being better to have it all in one house and get all the expertise in one place, rather than trying to distribute it.
SpaceX.
That competition will exist.
Yeah, look at SpaceX, right? They've moved everything in-house. They're building everything themselves.
And that's what Elon said. Like, factory is the product where it's like an integrated circuit. Everything, like a factory is integrated circuit. Everything in it like is tightly coupled.
Or even look at Boeing, for example. They used to do everything in one place, and then they split it up into a million different pieces, and then they split up parts of the company as like subcontractors, and look at what's happening now. Oh, by the way, Meta, check out what I sent you.
Will do.
Yeah.
I will also say splitting up is really bad because it's really seductive in the beginning.
Yeah.
Because you get this artificial bump in the beginning.
Yeah, I think I completely misinterpreted the point to begin with. I'm just realizing this now. So I initially thought you were talking about some like very large, like new technology, kind of like just like a single machine that was very big. No, I did not realize you were talking about a factory with a lot of the same machines, but just all the expertise and resources compiled into one place so that you could accelerate chip manufacturing.
Yeah, so
that makes sense.
Yeah, it's a lot.
I think you got fabrication machine mixed up.
I was being naive. Yes, I got it now.
Yeah. So
that would be a stupid idea, wouldn't it?
Yeah, so Intel basically, their Intel 7 for their manufacturing process of the chips was previously known as 10 ESF. And then they have one that's like Intel 4, and right next to it, Wikipedia has put like 7 nanometer EUV, and it's like the die size is
they're trying to trick people.
Yeah, and you can see the die size.
It's like the European standard versus the American, like the EPA versus the other one. I forget the name. It's like, no, we can just normalize these.
Yeah, so it's not an increasing number. It's actually a decreasing number meant to like represent the size. But they just decided, you know what, we're gonna do like instead of 10, we're gonna put 7, and instead of 7, we're gonna put 4.
Yeah, it's I think it might be one of those like, do you count the wire and the buffer or just the wire? And it's like, well, TSMC is counting both. You should count both, because the insulation of the wire should count, or whatever you want to call that. To Elliot's question earlier, I don't think it would necessarily be stupid to make a very, very big machine, right? You can look at a casting machine. One could have said that about the casting for quite a while. But single piece casting is actually really effective because you have much less error if it's all in one machine. Getting it all inside one machine is hard, but if you got a big enough order, say something like, there's these like circuits, like pieces that are patented, and then they're shared by people, like NVIDIA owns a lot of those, like blocks. Let's say that eventually you find out, there's a particular block that makes matrix multiplication really, really efficient. You might invest in a really, really big machine so you can build a really big chip with the largest matrix multiplication unit you've ever
seen.
So
you'd have like a massive chip for a massive chip fab.
I don't think that would be efficient, though. Right?
I don't know. Have you seen the latest chips? They're getting pretty big.
Yeah, they are, but that's because they're getting cut from a larger...
Maybe you would like double it in size or increase it by 30%, but you wouldn't like massively upscale it. Like you wouldn't actually need that. That wouldn't be thermodynamically feasible to make a giant like SRAM cache. Like it just wouldn't work.
I mean, you could run it and connect it to a nuclear power plant. I'm just kidding. It just wouldn't make sense, I think.
You have this giant... Dude, that's the type of thing Midjourney would generate.
Could you imagine like a giant nuclear power plant and all the power goes into this one little chip? It's only like 2 feet by 2 feet.
One little chip? It'd be a massive chip. Dude. The heat from that thing?
The heating and cooling there would be insane.
Put a hot tub on top of that shit, dude. You ever hear that? It's like you have a hot tub bathing in the tears of the D cells, which is being heated by your cluster of H100s in the basement. That's what it's like.
That's what people were saying they were doing with their Bitcoin miners. They're like, I just use the heat. I'm like, you're wasting a lot of electricity if you don't believe in cryptocurrency.
It's like, yeah, they're like, my house is warm. It's like, yeah, what's your power bill?
So I just looked into it. Apparently the EUV machines that already exist are already pushing the boundaries of what's physically possible. So making them larger would not even be...
This is true for everybody outside of Taiwan. I just want to make this clear. We don't know what happens in Magic Land.
No, ASML is a company in the Netherlands. They're the ones that make the EUV machines. But TSMC is a company that actually makes the chips themselves using the EUV machines.
What's the other company? I think it's in Korea or
Samsung?
Taiwan or no, not Samsung. They also do fab, but I'm forgetting the name right now.
Oh, I think you're thinking of.
They're arguably second.
I think you're thinking of MediaTek, right?
No, give me a moment.
Qualcomm, Micron Technology.
No.
That's it.
Wait, what are you talking? What?
I was thinking of Micron.
Micron. I think Micron split off from MediaTek.
Micron Technology Incorporated is an
Micron is
American
American.
producer of memory and data storage solutions, including dynamic random access memory, flash memory, and solid-state drives. One of the largest world semiconductor companies and only the U.S.-based manufacturer of memory.
Yeah, so
This is not Korea.
No, he's talking about Taiwan, the other one. Split off from Taiwan.
No, it was MediaTek and Micron getting confused in my head. I was thinking of the magic of memory, but for some reason I thought that was also in Korea. At least we have something.
What are you talking about? You have something?
We're good at making SRAM.
Oh, right. Yeah. But all memory, the best company that's making memory chips, though, is Samsung, as far as I know. Because, it doesn't look like TSMC is going to go into memory manufacturing, because apparently memory manufacturing is an extremely expensive business that has, comparatively to other sectors of the chip market, has lower margins.
I think we totally nerded out Adrian's space.
Hey, Matt, are you more of a fan of 80 SRAM cells or 60 SRAM cells?
I'm a software guy. I'll be honest, my understanding of hardware is as much as it pertains to AI, and that is it.
Dude, SRAM? SRAM is actually responsible for like trillions of dollars, though. Not even joking. Fucking VRAM is so easy to build, dude. Just parallel plate capacitors is the easiest shit ever. SRAM, whole different level, dude.
Meta, remember me and you argued about open source versus closed source, and you told me that security vulnerabilities, like what happened with ZD tools, I think it was, right? XZ tools wouldn't be like as common in Windows because it's proprietary.
If you're gonna go to CrowdStrike, I just want to say they open source the kernel.
I'm not gonna go to CrowdStrike, but Windows had a flaw in their implementation of the IPv6 algorithm, right? Where you could literally send a single fucking packet of IPv6 and it would get you root access to the entire system.
How does one discover that, though, without an insider?
No, they themselves told so a Chinese researcher figured this out, right? They sent it to Microsoft, right? And Microsoft sent a notice that this security bug was critical, right? And people needed to update their Windows machines immediately. And they wouldn't release any details about how to do this because they were like, this is so critical that we can't release details of how to do this. But it is extremely easy to do. And all you need to do is send a single fucking IPv6 algorithm. Fucking IPv6 packet. And then boom, you have like root access to the entire system.
Yeah, I'm not saying that private code doesn't have vulnerabilities, just to be clear. I'm just saying they're harder to discover.
Yeah, that's my exact problem with the proprietary code. Right?
Like, I will also say, it is very likely all these state actors that do stuff like the XUtil, they have employees at all the companies. The corollary really is, there is no security against a really well-funded, motivated state actor.
I mean, if it is open source, at least you have a chance of catching it. Right? Whereas with...
I disagree. Do you think that XUtils is the only sophisticated attack like that, how do you?
Okay.
I'm genuinely asking you because I know people are debating this still today. How do you catch that?
I mean, you have an autistic guy, right? That's like, this is running slightly slower than it should, right? And then he goes and fucking checks in the code, right?
No, I know what happened in this case. I'm saying generally.
Yeah, but
generally.
okay. So if you have so the point of open source is if you have more and more eyes on a project, and this is probably the biggest flaw with open source, right? If you don't have enough eyes on your project, then it's not as secure as if it was closed source, right? Because then any vulnerabilities that exist, you can go and actually exploit them. That was the problem of executils, which is that there was not enough eyes on the project, right? What if you have something like Linux, which has enough funding, enough government support, enough corporate support, right? So a structure like open source is significantly better, right? Because any problems that exist or any exploits that get added into the code can be discovered openly, right?
Do you remember Andrew Snowden or Edward Snowden's whole thing? Edward Snowden's whole thing about how every chip,
yes,
every circuit switch, everything had backdoors.
Yes.
Do you think they don't still have backdoors? Like,
No,
if they could listen
I know they have
on
backdoors.
calls of other states,
I know
officials.
they have backdoors, right? Intel has this system called Intel ME, and then AMD has a system that's equivalent to it, which basically allows remote access into your computer, right? And that's a.
But the key is, unlike all other vulnerabilities, the intention of the vulnerability, the fact that there was a private key, so only the key holder could actually attack, and they could attack everybody. Yeah, that sophisticated design of three multiple things getting together, combining and coming up with reasons why they had to exist.
Yeah, but imagine it like this, right? If it was proprietary code, right, that wouldn't have been as well hidden, right? The bar to clear on open source software is significantly higher.
I think you're falling into the trap of thinking open source software has caught all bugs like this.
No,
what I'm trying to say
I'm not saying that.
If we caught one, there's thousands of other ones.
I'm not saying it has caught everything, but if it has enough eyes, like something like the Linux kernel itself, right? You get fewer bad vulnerabilities that can hijack the entire system, at least in the kernel itself, than you would in something that's proprietary.
Okay, so here's a counterpoint. If it makes it past the introduction phase, it will be there forever in open source because people don't audit open source. What they do is look at the deltas. That's it.
I mean, it depends on the open source software. Every single piece of Linux, the Linux kernel, for example, is audited, right? And anything that's strange, it's taken out.
The heartbeat bug was just two spaces. Like the exeutil bug looked like a test in ASCII, but when reparsed into byte was instruction sets on a MIPS machine. These are really sophisticated attacks.
Yeah, but it's not executils isn't part of the Linux kernel itself. It's an open source tool that is commonly used in the operating systems, and it did not have many eyes on it, right?
OpenSSL is also the same way. Heartbleed was an
The problem with Heartbleed is that not Heartbleed. The problem with SSL as a whole is it's basically maintained by a few people, right?
Any code base that doesn't require a lot of change is not going to have a lot of people maintain it. So then I guess you're only open source things that are changing all the time.
My problem is, right? My problem is that I think that security through abstraction is probably the worst type of security. If your security is purely just relying on hiding the details of your code, so no one figures it out, right? And when they do figure it out, your system is a lot more vulnerable than something like open source.
I guess what I'm saying is when people use other companies' software, there is this hopefully level of distrust that is there. And when people use open source software, many intelligent engineers, I would argue,
had an outsized trust of the process and the system, and that is the issue.
Yeah,
It was just the tea I was wearing. It's just the tea.